Hey, welcome back to episode 11 of the Cellarcast. I'm getting good at remembering my numbers. This week was not I haven't eaten yet, so I might be a little frazzled, but I want to record this before I eat, because after I eat, I'm gonna be probably a big mess. So, I want to stop burping in these. It annoys me. It gets on my nerves. I had a bit of a slow week. Nothing really of note that I can remember happening to me. Oh yeah, I got a weird like message from someone from my old high school. He was a few years younger than me, but we were in band together. And he like just texted me out of the blue, and he was like, "Hey, you should come play in the band." And I was like, "Why? What do you mean play in the band?" And he goes, "Oh, you just like, we've got a new director, and you should like come back. It'll be really great. We need more people or something." And I was like, "Are you want me to like come back to play?" Like in the band? Like a student, like a goddamn student? Are you asking me to come and play in my high school band again? I'm sorry. No thank you. And then there was no follow-up after that. So I was like, okay, guess we'll leave it at that. Oh, I got really into oh god, I got really into Warhammer 40k lore. It always started. It started with like I've always seen artwork of it, and I was like, that looks really cool. But it seems really intimidating. Like the only anytime I was exposed to Warhammer stuff, it was always like, here's 20 novels or like a 5 hour YouTube video explaining the lore. That's what it always felt like, at least. And I was like, oh man, that's a lot to get into. It just seems like a big investment. And then I had a friend who was telling me about just offhandedly some Warhammer lore that he knew through a friend of his own, and I was like, that sounds pretty funny. That sounds fun. And I decided to go like just on a whim. I was looking at like one of the factions that he mentioned, and they have like on the Games Workshop website, they have uh like a list of every faction with like little, graphics and official art and stuff. And I saw one of them was like a clown jester faction. They're called the Harlequins. And I was like, oh, oh no, this is Tigan bait. I've always loved like the jester theming. I always thought it was just cool. And it's a whole faction of like space alien assassins who are like jesters. And I was like, oh no, I'm gonna spend too much time reading about this. So you go to the wiki and you start reading through some pages of lore, and you see one thing and you're like, what's that? And you click on a link, and then like 3 hours goes by, and you know you're like, oh, now I know I now I know all this other information about the universe. Now I'm looking up YouTube videos, and oh god, it's a big mess. So my big hurdle with getting into Warhammer is Warhammer is a luxury hobby. If anyone doesn't know what Warhammer is, Warhammer 40k is a tabletop war strategy game where basically you have a bunch of little models that you assemble and paint yourself, and those are your army, and then you fight them against someone else's army on a little board that I'm assuming, I think that like you can, I actually don't know how the boards are set up, but there's like terrain and everyone's got different abilities. And the Warhammer universe has this extremely, extremely lengthy lore. And the lore is, so my issue is, I really like the lore. I think it's really neat and a lot of fun. The artwork is gorgeous. The designs are cool. I love the aesthetics. It's like sci-fi, big gothic sci-fi space armor. The problem is when I'm like, okay, I want to interact with this more than just, in a more substantial way than just a wiki page, reading through a wiki page. So what I'll do is I'll check out, the actual, you want to check out the actual content. So my issue, and this is a very personal thing, maybe not, maybe it probably reflects how some other people feel about it, is that Warhammer's really expensive. You gotta spend money on the models, and like a starter kit is like $160 or something. It's like, yeesh, that's to like try it out? Oh boy. You gotta spend money on models, you gotta spend money on paints, you gotta assemble them, you gotta paint them yourself, and then you have to find someone else to play with. And the games themselves can go for a while. So it's like, this is a time and money investment. And I have to interact with people, which is never good. Like, my thing is like, when you introduce other human beings into the process, my energy, it burns through my energy so much faster. If I'm just allowed to like get into something on my own, it's like, no problem, no big deal. I'll literally spend 7 hours doing something just straight and just completely forget about, time, have no concept of it. It just flies by. When I have to like, okay, I gotta interact with people, it's like, ooh, after an hour, I'm ready to tap out. And like, I don't want this to be a way to make friends. I don't want to make friends. I don't want a hobby that's gonna make me friends, okay? That's not what I'm here for. Let's get one thing straight. Capiche? Capiche. So how can I interact with this thing? The other problem is that what I find really interesting is the lore and the universe and the characters. But the main thing, which is the board game, is not really an avenue to tell stories. Like, it's a way to tell ludonarratives, that is, stories through play. Haha. So I'm putting on my big game journo cap, my big word cap. It's a way to tell ludonarratives, but actual like stories within the universe, not really, because it's a board game. It's like the same problem like games like League suffer from, where it's like, the game is basically a crossover game, but all the actual like main content is all spin-off stuff. It's a really weird situation. Because like nothing that happens in the game is canonical or really tells a story that actually matters to the world. Except for the Burning Tides event back in 15 or 16? But they're never going to do that again. Anyway, I'll stop being salty about League. So what I figured, I was like, okay, let me check out the spin-off material where the actual stories occur. I'm like, there's a ton of books, so there's a ton of games. Most of them are like RTSs and stuff like that. There is one like third-person shooter that looks pretty neat, actually. It apparently is like one of the better non-strategy games in the series. My other problem, this is where I run into my other problem, which is apparently Games Workshop is a bunch of assholes who just strike down fan animation channels because they're so sensitive about their copyright, even though every other company is cool with that stuff and nothing has happened. Yeah, I mean, copyright law sucks. I wish IP law didn't exist because it doesn't actually help the people that it's supposed to protect. That's a different rant. IP law generally only benefits large companies that have the power already to shut down smaller derivative works, and really aren't that much hurt by piracy. IP law is supposed to protect, the little guy, when in reality, because it requires legal action, which is very expensive, at least in the United States, I'm assuming most other places, it generally ends up being completely useless for them. Like, most small artists don't even interact with copyright, besides putting a copyright on it, just cause, so they have the legal right to in case. And they end up usually just having to deal with it on their own, or being completely helpless to do anything about people stealing their stuff. So, yeah. Then big stupid companies like Games Workshop exploit it to basically just be big dicks to people who love their property so much that they will pour hundreds of hours of hard work and effort and skill and talent. And there's probably people who learned animation through trying to do Warhammer animations, and then no, fuck you. So it's like the company sucks. So how can I interact with this property in a way that I'm okay with? Because I do think about, like, where my dollar's going. And I try to at least somewhat, in the way that I can control about the things that I really care about. Control, what I'm supporting. Kind of like, if you remember back when... I don't know if anyone remembers this. This is I want to say a few months ago. Everyone realized that Scott Cawthon was a huge Republican. Scott Cawthon, the creator of Five Nights at Freddy's. It's funny because I remember way back when I heard this news. Basically, what happened? This is old news, but Scott Cawthon, the Five Nights at Freddy's guy, someone found out. I forget how it happened, but basically they found out that he was a huge Republican supporter and a donor. And that was a problem because, well, let's roll it back. When I found out about that, I was like, did people really not know that? Did people really not know that Scott Cawthon was like a hardcore conservative? Because I remember back in 2014 when FNAF blew up that I remember just finding out through, I think, like the Jimquisition or something that, yeah, he was like all of his games before FNAF were like about the Bible, and they all had like the exact same visual aesthetic, so it wasn't just like an artistic thing. It just, his games really just looked like that. So he, yeah, then it, I think it's like, I don't really get upset over, this is going to be a relevant topic soon, coming up in the episode. I don't really get upset over people's political opinions. You can have whatever opinion you want as long as you're not hurting someone or forcing it on someone else or generally, making trouble for people. Like, it's your business. He can be a Republican if he wants to. The big problem, and where I see it being an issue, is that he was also a donor to several Republican campaigns that were not too LGBT friendly, if you know what I'm talking about. And I can legitimately see, if you are LGBT or if you support those, say those people as if I don't. If you're a supporter of, LGBT issues and all that stuff, knowing that your money that was given to him for his game eventually maybe might have gone into stuff that, you potentially was against your rights or your interests as a marginalized group. I can see you legitimately, it's perfectly reasonable to be upset over that. And you know, like, honestly, like, I mean, I wasn't planning on buying Five Nights at I've never been into the series at all, but yeah, I don't know, that would probably make me at least hesitate, if not just not donate, or not donate, not, you know, support him at all. I'd be a little upset about that if I was a big, you know, a big Freddy fan. So that's kind of the problem that you have with I have with Games Workshop. I'm like, fucking. So how do I interact with Warhammer in a way that I'm comfortable with? And I just kind of sit out on the books, because I'm like, okay, if you buy the books, yes, some money's going to them, but it's also going to, I like to think of it as I'm supporting the author and not that. I don't know what their deals are like. Like, I'm sure that they get an amount of money from it. I mean, of course they do. At the same time, if there's a good person who's working, like, this is why I don't have, even though Riot did some scummy shit recently with, even though Riot did some scummy stuff recently with firing some of their best writers, I promised I wouldn't get salty about League again. I'm still going to check out the fighting game, because in my view, maybe you could call this just a rationalization, but in my view, it's like, okay, well, the fighting game isn't technically, well, it is Riot, but it's being done by Tony Cannon's team. Is it Tony? Which one of the Cannon brothers is doing the fighting game? I forget. And, you know, Team Valiant, were they called? Oh, God. I feel embarrassed now. The Rising Thunder team. It's like, it's being done by them. I want to support them. I know that they're going to make a good product and that they care. I want to support the non-scummy part of a business if I can. And if there's someone who's just a cool person who's just writing books for Warhammer, I don't really have a problem giving money to them. If I'm just giving money directly to Games Workshop, you know, maybe I'd have some qualms about that, especially if I was really invested in the community. But I think that, you know, stuff like the books is a little easier for me to justify. So I went to Barnes & Noble and I ordered... they didn't have anything in stock, but I ordered one particular book that I was curious about. It's by Dan Abner. He does a series called Gaunt's Ghosts, which is about one of the factions, the Guardsmen, who are kind of like the generic military guys, the non-genetically enhanced super space marines. And yeah, so that'll be here in like about 5 business days. So I'm looking forward to strolling on down. I live really close to the Barnes and Noble, and picking that up. Anyway, enough about Warhammer. Let's jump into the comment review. So we have a question this week coming from Lozy. So we often do. Yep. I did not know about the mod with Weapons of Mega Man. I will try it when I can. It's referring to Mega Man 8-bit Deathmatch, which is a great Doom mod, which you can actually just download directly from their site, and you don't even have to own Doom or anything. It has its own launcher and all that. Are you going to do more reviews for the channel? Surely they aren't 100% reviews, but I think you understand what videos I mean. Yeah, so, I mean, I basically, basically the videos that I've made in the past on individual games, which would be stuff like, I guess the first one would be probably Mega Man 2 is my oldest one. It's like my second video. Mega Man 2, what else have I done? Jekyll and Hyde. The Quiet Man would probably be the next one, I think. The U Testament, and then it's funny because, he asked this and then I was already working on the Citizens review. And, well, it's not really a review, it's kind of like a weird you can't really review it because it's not a full product, but you know, get videos that focus on like a single game. And yes, I would like to. In fact, I literally already have in the time since that you've left the comment. So the way that I go about deciding what subjects I want to do for videos is basically stuff that interests me that I think would justify a full video. So when I played something like Jekyll and Hyde, it was like, I just want to talk about how much I hate this and how bad it is because no one really talks about specifically what's so bad about it. And I felt like because I played it for so long and I 100%ed it, that I had a pretty decent understanding of it. So, yeah, I don't do... So, a little bit behind the scenes, the videos of mine that do the best tend to be the more historical ones, that are talking about maybe a broader topic. It's a little random. My views are pretty inconsistent. But the ones that usually when I do videos about a specific game, it tends not to do very well. And that's fine. And it's not going to stop me from doing them if I really want to. But I try to focus on, you know... Ooh, that was a nice crack. I never do a video on something that I don't want to make a video about, but it's like I just pick and choose which things I'm interested in that are more likely to net me interest, I guess. So if I play something that I find really interesting and unique and that I want to talk about, and there's actually a game that I have in mind currently that I have not played just because I kind of want to, like, I don't know, I haven't found good time for it, I guess. I just need to sit down and do it, basically. It'll also probably be a lot of footage to comb through. And yeah, that's the other thing, actually, is that they're a little more, those videos tend to be a little more difficult for me to make. Like, I tend to have way more footage to go through, because I like to go kind of from like beginning to end, or I try to be pretty comprehensive when I do a review, because I do care a lot about game design, and I want my analysis to be like full. And if I'm looking at like a specific game, I want to like give like a good thorough overview of the game, you know, what it is, pros and cons and stuff I like, and then just kind of naturally throughout the editing process, I just end up throwing in a bunch of jokes. But it tends to be a lot more work to make those videos because I'm looking through so much more footage, and because the scripts tend to be longer. I mean, the Quiet Man review, I was literally editing that video for like 48 hours straight. It was like a huge undertaking. Like I didn't sleep, and it was fine because I had fun, but yeah, it was it's a lot more effort compared to my other more like historical focused videos that are a little bit broader or focus on a more general topic. Like, you know, I made the 480 video. I made that video in like 3 days, and I was really happy with it. So it's like comparably less work for me for more return. But I do enjoy them, and sometimes, you know, I'll do things that if I'm really passionate about a certain game and I want to talk about it because I find it interesting, I will. I hope that basically answered the questions. Yes, I will, just probably not as much because of the time and effort required, slash it has to be the right game, basically. that if I find it interesting enough, if there's like a neat story, like The Quiet Man has such an interesting one. It was just, I was legitimately upset that I played that, and it's just such a weird, baffling experience because of the way that they handled the sound and all that. The U Testament was like, this is just so strange, and the guy who made it is so weird, and his ideas are what, like, what's going on here? So yeah, I definitely want, if that stuff is fun to me, and exploring that stuff and exploring weird, interesting creators. If I can, if I can always kind of base it, I try to base all of my stuff in like some kind of a human element, because it's more relatable. It kind of lends better to telling a story. The idea is, all of my videos, I kind of want to tell some kind of a story. Usually that ends up just talking about history and stuff, and going from, point A to point B to point C. But sometimes it's just like, hey, look at this interesting person. Yeah, so hope that answers your question. Funny little lighthearted story. There's a little heavy stories this week, or a little more meaty ones. But we got a funny little one. This is from Games Radar by Connor Sheridan. This 40-year-old game is finally playable thanks to a fixed typo. So this is funny. So way back in 1981, Radio Shack had released a TRS-80 personal computer. So it was, let's see. So Harry McCracken was an enthusiast developer for the TRS-80 personal computer, which I've got to be honest, I've never really heard of. And apparently now he's an editor of Fast Company, which is a tech. He's a tech editor on Fast Company. So, there was a book of, so one thing that, if you remember back in my, oh yeah, it was the Girls of Gaming video. Back then, games were so simple that you could fit like the entire code for a game onto like a single page, and then you would buy a magazine or something, or this is how like PC magazines used to be. You would buy it, and then they would have a few pages of, here's the code for a game. It's like 40 lines. Type it into your computer, and then you have the game. And there was a book called The Captain 80 Book of Basic Adventures. Basic, the programming language, which was a bunch of games that it was just, it was a collection of games you could punch into your TRS-80 and go to town with. However, apparently there was one game called Arctic Adventure, which was completely unplayable, not because of any design flaws or anything, but because of a single typo. So let's read from the article. McCracken finally took the project back up, talking about the Arctic Adventure, when he found a copy of the old book online and slowly, painstakingly punched in each line of the program's basic code into the TRS-80 emulator running on his iPad. This was the 1981 equivalent of clicking the download button on Steam. So he says, that was when I made an alarming discovery. As printed in the Captain 80 book, the game wasn't just unwinnable, but unplayable. It turned out that it had a 1981 typo that consisted of a single missing zero in a character string. It was so fundamental a glitch that it rendered the game's command of the English language inoperable. So this was like an adventure game, right? So it says, you couldn't get shovel, let alone complete the adventure. He can't be sure whether the typo, which stood uncorrected for 4 decades, was his. He is the original author, his or the publication's fault, but it's fixed now. So he went back 40 years later. Oh, I messed up. Oops. And then fixed it. So yeah, now you can actually go check out Arctic Adventure on McCracken's website. I haven't checked it out yet, but it's I'm sure it's, it can't be that long. Check it out. Fun little story from a very unique little time in gaming where you could download a game and it was actually just irreparably bugged, and you would have no idea why if you didn't understand coding or the original programming. It actually reminds me of Aliens Colonial Marines. It's funny because now that Fire Team is out, maybe this is more relevant, but Colonial Marines, infamously buggy, hacked together, rushed game. One of the things that was always like one of the big points against the game was that the AI for the aliens was just bugged to hell. Which resulted in that famous video of the alien dancing, or glitching out to look like it was dancing and doing the little like, hello my baby, hello my honey, hello my ragtime girl, just doing that little like leg kick dance. And apparently the reason for that bug, which was discovered like years later, was a single typo in the game's code. So like basically the way that it worked was that every level of the game was split up into several smaller like zones, like invisible, they're basically invisible borders that carved up different areas of the map. And there was a whole set of like functions for the aliens to do, to control their AI, depending on, whether the player was doing something, whether they were in that zone, whether they were, in one place or the other. And it was all tied to the pieces of the map, not the aliens themselves, not their AI themselves, which I'm pretty sure is probably a pretty standard AI practice. However, so basically, if I remember correctly, it was something like this. Not exactly, maybe, but I might be a little bit wrong on this. But the basic premise was the glitch was that the main variable that controlled whether, basically that told the alien entity, game entity, which area of the map it was on, was called tether. So it would tether to that area. It was misspelled. What the hell's going on over there? It was misspelled yether. Because Y is right next to T on the keyboard. And so even though all of the coding, all of the scripting for the actual AI, like all the interactions, all the statements, everything was typed correctly in the script for the areas, because the one single script for the aliens misspelled it yether, it literally just didn't work, which is why their AI is just like totally random, like super simple, like the basic functions that they had built in. Yeah, typos are deadly. I'm sure that is there like not a I wonder if there's not like I've done a tiny bit of coding before I realized that I really didn't enjoy it that much. I don't remember using like what I'm trying is there should be, if there isn't, there should, I wonder if there's like a function that if there's a variable that actually hasn't like been defined or is unique and doesn't connect to something, it should probably get its own little indicator, just in case you maybe typed something that doesn't make any sense or doesn't connect to anything else. That might be a good feature, and games from like what, 2013 or something. Might have already been patched into Windows. I forget what it's called. Or Microsoft Visual? I forget what the program's called. I literally haven't done any coding in like 4 years, 5 years. Here's an interesting story. So there's a lot of stuff going on in China right now, and one of those, they're kind of overhauling many different parts of their country right now. I guess they're having like, their preseason update where they're gonna change everything around. So there was a story I want to say a week or two ago about basically two conflicting reports. One from the China's like health or whatever, one of their ministries. My throat's super dry. Give me 1 second. Where did it? There was a report or a statement put out by one of their little divisions, one of their little departments, that it called, basically indicted or criticized gaming, labeled it a social opioid or a spiritual opioid for the youth. And if you are familiar with Chinese history, relating something to an opioid is a very, very powerful image. It's a very strong, it's kind of like if you live in the US and you're somewhat familiar with US race relations, it's kind of like comparing something to slavery would probably be the closest comparison. So it's like a very serious blight on a country's past. So it's like, you don't really go around, you don't go flinging around that kind of language lightly. So calling gaming a spiritual opioid for the youth is a pretty strong call out. Basically, they're concerned about gaming addiction, which we did talk about a little bit last time, among the youth. And then, hilariously, they're like what is it called? It's like the Ministry of Art and Visual Entertainment or something like that, who really likes gaming because of the amount of money it generates for the economy, was like, no guys, gaming is cool. Games are cool, guys. Haha. So there's like some kind of internal debate going on in the Chinese government about whether or not video games are the devil or not. And it looks like the former department won out. So if we're going to read this comes from the South China Morning Post. I said I wouldn't burp this time. God damn it. The South China Morning Post by Josh Ye, or Yi, I'm sorry. China limits gaming time for under 18s to 1 hour a day on Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, and public holidays. Woo-wee. This is This is pretty big. So basically, if you remember, similarly, we talked about the South Korean games curfew. So the South Korean games curfew, which is a little different from this. This is not really a curfew. It is a just straight up lockdown. So let's read a bit. Beijing has issued a new rule limiting the gaming time for players aged under 18 to between 8, oh my god, it's specific times? I didn't even realize that. 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. only on Friday, Saturday, Sundays, and statutory holidays. So the National Press and Publication Administration, the NAAP, which is China's top watchdog for gaming and other forms of online media, formally issued the rules to combat gaming addiction among teenagers, according to a report by state media outlet Xinhua. The previous rules, introduced in 2019, limited the playtime for minors to no more than 90 minutes each day and 3 hours on statutory holidays. So it was already pretty tight. But they are further... I wonder how they enforce this. They are further tightening that grip. So while the direct impact on Chinese gaming companies such as Tencent Holdings and NetEase may be limited, as players under 18 currently account for only a small part of revenues, over the longer term, the new rule could gradually erode the country's player base. So this is the really important thing, because you hear about that, you're like, okay, how many people under 18 are big spenders or big players or whatever? Like, yeah, kids have a lot of time to play games, but it's just kids, It is a big deal long term. And when I say long term, I mean in the next, let's say 5 to 10 years, it will have immediate effects. It will have very quick, harsh effects within the next 5 to 15 years. It's up to 15. So the reason for that is, if you don't get into gaming as a kid, how likely are you to get into it once you're 19? Right? Like, there's really not that many people who get into gaming after childhood. Some people do. It's obviously not unheard of. But there's a lot of things that kind of like hold... When you grow up with there's a lot of things in video games that are just kind of like, you just kind of have to understand. I kind of think of it like back in like the 1930s or whatever, or when movies started being a thing, back in like the silent era and early, like when wide distribution and all that, people used to, when they would watch a film, if there was a cut from one scene to another, and the new scene took place in a different location that had no relation to the previous one, but it's like the characters are here now, or whatever, people were like legitimately confused, and they got like disoriented because they just didn't understand the idea of a cut, or the idea that the next image you see is not going to be like literally the next second of time in the story. It's going to be like, cutting to an hour later when they're here instead of at home or wherever. So you'll notice these kind of like little transitions that they would do with like always showing like the characters driving off somewhere or something like that. Basically putting in little visual hints to tell the audience what, like, clue them into like, okay, we are going somewhere, assume that time has passed. And that's why you see like, fades, because that, like, I think just visually fade-ins help tell the because think about it, you're like, especially if you're literally physically editing film, it's probably much easier to just make an actual physical cut than to do a fade, which would require a little bit of I don't know how they accomplished it, but a little bit of like, I'm assuming overlaying and stuff like that. Um, but they would do that because it would help the audience understand that a scene was changing. Gaming is full of stuff like that, of just stuff that you just have to kind of know. You just have to sort of figure it out from playing other games. Like, if like, my dad doesn't know, for instance, that like when I pick up a controller, the A button is probably going to jump. The A, or if you have something like the Switch controller, the bottom face button is probably going to be jump. Like, he doesn't know that, and it's like, okay, well, why do I know that? It's like, well, back in the NES, there was like A and B. There were only 2 buttons, and Mario did A and B, and it kind of made more sense. For some reason, it was like the main function of a platformer, so it comes first. Then games have started copying Mario because, it just made sense and people were familiar with it. You probably already played Mario or knew about it, and you knew that A was jump. So when you go play Mega Man, A is still jump. Okay, cool. And B is my other function. And then, as buttons multiply, it's like, okay, then you got the SNES, and it's like, okay, A is still jump. And then you've got other consoles, and it just kind of becomes a trend. It just kind of becomes the normal accepted status quo for no other reason than that's just kind of the way that they did it at first, because it's sort of, it made sense to them at the time. It was sort of arbitrary, but it made sense, and now it's what everyone uses. And then you get into like, okay, the PlayStation comes out. Well, the PlayStation doesn't use letters, it uses little symbols. So what is jump? Oh, it's X. Why is it X? Well, X is on the bottom, and that's where it is on the Super Nintendo, right? SNES controller. No, the SNES controller has A on the right, which is weird. Is that... wait. Do most SNES games use... What do most SNES games... A... jump? How do I even search this up? I actually haven't played that many Super Nintendo games. Yeah, B is used to jump for some reason. Here's no, actually this works even better in my thing. In my explanation, like, okay, well, suddenly B is jump. Why is B jump and not A? I don't know, because they picked it. It might be because like B is on the bottom and it's a little easier to reach like Y and A with your thumb, as opposed to like, I guess maybe it's like easier to go like from the bottom to like lift your thumb up compared to lifting it to from like the right side to X and B, like top and bottom, maybe. I don't know. Actually, no, you can just roll your thumb. I don't know. It was probably just arbitrary. And then, the PlayStation comes out. Why is X jump? Oh, because it's the bottom face button. Why is that? Why is that jump? Super Nintendo did it. I'm stumbling over my words, but I hope you understand what I mean. These little trends start, and it's just like, it's just kind of an arbitrary thing, but most people do it, and so that's how we're going to do it. And so my dad can pick up a controller and look at a bunch of buttons and have no idea what any of it means, but I can pick it up and look at it and be like, okay, X means select, because that's what it is in America. And then if you're in Japan, it's circle for some reason. But if you're on an Xbox controller, A is select and X is something else and B is back. And it's like, there's just all of this like basic knowledge of like, okay, I can pick up a controller and have no problem. If someone does no idea about video games, they never played a game in their life, and they pick up a controller, it is such a foreign object. It looks like something like just a science fiction implement. They have no idea what any of these things do. They don't know, like, oh, the triggers on the back are like for shooting, or maybe, or like they have no idea. They have no concept of this stuff that would seem so obvious to someone who's been playing games their entire life. And it's just this really basic level of accessibility that you have to overcome when you're a kid, and you just learn it because that's just the way it is, and everyone's kind of okay with it. And granted, a lot of this is overcome by mobile gaming, but mobile gaming is only one part of... Mobile games don't tend to... Most mobile games do not have as intense fan bases as I think you see. It's not as common to see that compared to console or PC games, right? Compared to other platforms. Again, just because it's a little hard. If you're on those platforms, you're probably congregating with other people who already play those things on... I talked about this a little bit last time on... talking on message boards and Reddit and Twitter and stuff like that about these games. They tend to have an easier time playing multiplayer is another thing. So they just lend a little bit easier to like really fast connections, whereas mobile games are more accessible. So I guess more individual players, if that makes sense. Let's say console and PC games, by their nature and the platform, are easier to get a group in compared to mobile games, which are easier to get singular users into. Does that make sense? I don't know if there's any data to back that up, but it makes sense to me. So if you weren't exposed to games as a kid, or if your exposure is so limited that you can only play 3 hours a day on weekends and Fridays and holidays, then not 3 hours a day, 3 hours a week. You get 1 hour. You get 1 hour a week. 1 hour a day. Oh my god. Yeah, 1 hour a day. Like, that's not... You would probably... There's obviously, it's not going to deter everyone, but it's going to deter a decent amount of the population from playing games. And really getting into it. The high spenders, or the big spenders, are the people who make it part of their lifestyle in adulthood, like me. Those people get started as children, and they get into it as children. Most of the time, it's much rarer to see someone as an adult get into gaming. Gaming kind of grows with you as you get older, right? Because like you can start off playing, accessible or friendlier things like Mario, and then as you get older, there is a market for you of like, I want to play something more mature. I want to play The Last of Us. I want to play God of War. I want to play, something maybe that's... Mario's hard, but something like really challenging. I want to play a Dark Souls. I want to expand into stuff that is, maybe more intellectually mature, like Mass Effect or something like that. There's a market for that, and it really all hinges on... A lot of it hinges on... getting started as a kid. So in the long term, this is going to really, really kill... I think seriously, it's going to kill the entire industry in China. Maybe not the entire industry, but a lot of it, right? There's still going to be, adults gaming for many, many years. But the amount of... the growth is going to slow down. It's going to shrink. It's funny because it's really similar to like the one-child policy. If nobody is aware of this... for some reason I feel like there's a comparison here, but the so like maybe this is like a little too political. I don't know. China can basically never engage in another ground war again, or a war with like actual troops on the ground, because of the one-child policy. Because they have an imbalance of males to females, with more males. And so if you send in like an army to go fight a battle, and like 20% dies, I don't know what a reasonable number is. That's just like 20. That's like 200 families, let's say. That's like 200 families that are just gone because their son is gone. And the new gaming it's so weird to relate this to gaming, but like, yeah, you know, there's it becomes a lot more individuals become way more valuable to continuing the industry, because if they're gone, then there's no one really to replace them. It's a lot more fragile, if you know what I mean. I think that's a good word to describe it. The Chinese gaming industry has suddenly become very fragile, and it will get increasingly more so. And, you know, I think, funny enough, I saw a tweet that was kind of funny, and I sort of agree with it. It's, you know, sort of ironic, and it's kind of ironic, a little sad, but also kind of a vindicating, is that the right word? A little cathartic. Not cathartic, but to see so many Western industries, entertainment industries, bend and warp to appeal to a Chinese market, and then to have that market totally turn their backs on them without a second thought, is hilarious to me, because Hollywood's box office sales went way down in 2020 because China actually has a quota. They have a maximum number, I guess would be actually the better. Quotas can go up forever, but quota is just a minimum. They have a maximum amount of foreign films which are allowed to basically be let into the country. And they tightened down on that because they're trying to grow their own film industry. So all of those movies that tried to appeal to a Chinese audience by basically just being spectacle that you didn't have to understand another language to understand what was going on or anything like that. Yep, those are guess you guys messed up. all those Transformers movies that were just made for China. Guess you guys messed up. It was a bad investment. They don't care anymore. And good for them, honestly. They should focus on home growing their own entertainment like we should. I think personally, like, it's so lame to see like stuff that comes out of your country being made specifically for another country, and knowing that they don't really care about their home audience, because what happens is you start abandoning, like, you know, your own culture and your own, you know, stuff in your own medium, right? Like traditions in your own medium, to appeal to this market that you probably don't even really understand that well, and you're probably just better off making stuff for your own audience. And then if other people are interested in it, then they should be allowed to also engage with stuff from other cultures. So yeah, bad news for China. Bad news for Chinese gaming. And now they're starting to so the main reason for this new tightening on the, what would you call it? Yeah, just restrictions on game time. So, quote, so this is a spokesperson for NAAP. Many parents have said that the gaming addiction problem among teens and children has gravely affected their ability to learn and study, as well as their physical and mental health, even causing a series of societal problems. Now, that could be entirely made up. I would believe it if it was entirely made up. Or I wouldn't be surprised if it was entirely made up. However, it again, like as I discussed earlier on last episode, addiction is a symptom of a problem. Why are so many people in China falling into gaming addiction? Why are so many young people being falling victim to obsessions to fill voids in their lives? I wonder. That's not a question for me to answer. It's a question for Chinese government, I guess. So yeah, there's a state media article which described video games as spiritual opium. So Tencent, right? So holy cannoli. So Tencent, the world's largest gaming company by revenue, lost $43 billion from its market evaluation in a matter of hours. Tencent has lost more than $400 billion in value since a high in February. That is crazy. So, in their recent quarterly reports this month, Tencent and Bilibili both emphasized that Bilibili is a video sharing platform in China, which I guess ties into this because it's also online media. Both emphasize that they have faithfully implemented the anti-addiction measures required by state authorities and that minors have become a small portion of their overall user base. Tencent said that players under 16 accounted for just 2.6% of its gross gaming receipts in China, with those under 12 accounting for just 0.3%. Bilibili said that minors contributed only 1% of the company's gaming revenue. So this is, yeah, that's not great. $43 billion. That is a chunk of change. Yeah, so the funny thing is that we might actually see a flip side, reverse of what happened with America, which is Chinese game developers might start making games for foreign markets, which would be a really bizarre. I'd almost be curious. I mean, you've got a Black Myth Wukong coming out, which I saw a little bit of, and honestly looks kind of sick. I'm probably not going to get it because I don't buy new games, but it looks pretty sick, honestly. And it's something that you can't deny does have an appeal to, like, the type of market that would buy God of War. It kind of really comes off as like almost an Eastern God of War, in the sense that it's like an action thing that's based off of Chinese mythology or takes inspiration from it, in the same way that God of War is a American, Western action series that takes inspiration from like Greek mythology and Roman mythology. There's kind of a similar through line, like, oh, if you like God of War, you might like this because it's kind of the same appeal of like digging into myths and stuff and making a cool action game out of it. I could definitely see it having the same appeal for that kind of audience. And Journey to the West is criminally underrepresented in the West, whereas I think that like stuff like Greek mythology that we love is I don't know how popular it is in China or other like Japan, Korea, Indonesia. I don't know how popular it is over there. Maybe it's equally as popular as it is here, or maybe not. But mythology's cool. Mythology's cool. It's cool to learn about other cultures and mythologies and all that. What the hell am I? got off on a weird tangent. But yeah, they might have to actually start making games for other markets, which is really, really odd, because the market of adults is going to, it'll be there for a while, but it's going to start shrinking. And Yeah, it's rough waters ahead, rough times ahead. There's an article right under this one. It says China's video game industry in stormy waters. Uh-huh. So was that also by the same guy? Yep, same dude. Josh Yee. Was that written afterwards? Yeah, it was written. No, it was written a little bit beforehand, actually. Okay. Yeah, I'm curious about where this is gonna go. Speaking of politics, I just thought this was kind of a funny story. Maybe not funny, depending on how you look at it. So there was recently there was a vote passed in Texas, I think, that basically made it made like abortions on babies. Let's see, law banning Texas law banning abortion for babies with a heartbeat. So basically, fetuses have I believe they have heartbeats pretty early on into development, like 6 weeks or something. So it was a pretty early. Basically, it made it's like one of the tightest abortion laws. Talking a lot about tight laws today. Laws tightening down on stuff in the country. So now, I have no input on that. This is not a political podcast. I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about John Gibson, who was the president of Tripwire Interactive, whom you might know from Maneater and Killing Floor 2. They are the co-developers, I think, of Maneater, which is that shark GTA with sharks. Red Orchestra, yeah, they did Killing Floor. Anything else really noteworthy? Nah, basically just a bunch of Killing Floor stuff and Maneater. They're the co-developers with Shipwright Studios, and John Gibson is the president of Tripwire, and he said, proud of hashtag US Supreme Court affirming the Texas law banning abortion for babies with a heartbeat. As an entertainer, I don't get political often, yet with so many vocal peers on the other side of this issue, I felt it was important to go on the record as a pro-life game developer. I think the best thing to sum up the response to this was, I think Dave Zemansky quote tweeted it with something like, okay, but why? But why did you have to do that, though? Whatever your feelings on abortion are. God, I hate that I have to say that. I hate that I have to bring this up, but I just think this story's too funny. So when you're like the president of a company, it's funny that he describes himself as an entertainer, because he's not an entertainer. He's the president of a company that makes entertainment. If you're like a musician or an artist or whatever, sure, you can say whatever you want. That's fine. You have the right to do that. Whatever opinion you want, pro, anti, whatever. When you're the president of a company, that's a little different, because you are now representing. So the president of a company represents the entire company and all of the employees under it. So when you're a leader, you're responsible for everything that comes out of your company, and your company is responsible for everything that comes out of you. So when you come out and as an individual take a strong political stance, it ends up reflecting on the entire company. Like, oh, it turns out that the people who own Chick-fil-A are very homophobic. That reflects on the entire company. If you don't want your entire company to seem homophobic, even if you are, just don't say anything. And probably don't be a donor like Scott Cawthon. Because there's a good chance that there's people in your company who are against this Texas vote, who are kind of upset that they are now in a company that is that he calls. Okay, here's the problem. Here's the way that he worded it. He said, "Go on the record as a pro-life game developer." Pro-life. Okay, so when you say developer, do you mean an individual? Because developer could mean an individual, or it could mean the company. So like, I guess I now work at an anti-abortion company. I guess that's our stance now. That's the company I work for. I would be a little uncomfortable with my company if I worked for a company and they made a really strong political stance, or the president made a really strong political stance on anything. I would be a little uncomfortable because I'm now associated with that, especially if it doesn't reflect my own beliefs. This was just an incredibly stupid move. I don't know why he did this. Probably just because he wanted to. People have a lot of pride over their political opinions, which is funny. I mean, you see this with like with multiple different sides of the spectrum. Like with there's people who come out and they say that they're pro LGBT and they change their thing to a rainbow flag and they're like, guys, aren't I so cool? And it's like, yes, everyone. Generally, most people. Congratulations. And the people who just really put it in your face, it's like, okay, are you just trying to get attention? Are you, especially if they aren't gay, which is really funny, or LGBT. I understand that you're pro LGBT. Please stop talking about it. It's like, I live in a very democratic area. And there's a lot of, like, you walk outside, and there's, like, I have so many neighbors who have those signs out front. I don't know if everyone has these or if they're common, but at least in my area, it's just a thing. There's, like, 7 or 8 little slogans about, like, trans rights are human rights, Black Lives Matter. And it's like, I don't necessarily disagree with any of these things. But, like, what is the purpose of saying this? It's like when someone it's almost like a boy who cried wolf situation. Like someone's like, I really, guys, I'm like I am such a male feminist. I am so for women's equality. And it's like, are you trying to convince me or you? Like, aren't most people probably should be for equal rights? Why is this so relevant? Or why is this so noteworthy that you have to keep talking about it? I just kind of assume that when I meet someone and they're generally pretty nice, that, they're not like, they don't hate a group of people. In most cases, I feel like most people aren't bigoted. So why do you insist so much that you aren't? People are just so, and really the purpose of putting those signs in your yard is to tell, it's not, like, you're not changing anyone's mind, right? No one's going to walk past that, they're going to see, oh, I guess Black lives do matter. It's like, yes, of course they fucking... The purpose of it is to impress your neighbors and to tell your neighbors that you're on the right side of the political spectrum. It's the same thing when you see people who put the big MAGA signs in their yard. It's either I'm trying to tell my neighbors that I'm also with them and we're all part of the same group, because people just want to be a part of a group. Or I'm so brave for standing out in this sea of dissent that I hold this contrary opinion. I'm so brave. And it's like, no, you put a sign in your yard, no one cares. Why? So when Mr. Gibson comes out and he says, I don't know if anyone knows this, but I am extremely anti-abortion. I don't know if anyone knows this. It's like, okay, congrats, omedeto, omedeto, grazie. Wait, grazie doesn't mean. Never mind. It works. It's just super lame, and it's like, why do you have to bring, after you're retired, do whatever, but like while you're representing a company, please don't implicate them in your personal politics. So, the co-developers of Maneater, Shipwright Studios, put out this statement like immediately saying, while your politics are your own, the moment you make them a matter of public discourse, you entangle all of those working for and with you, which is true. We have worked closely alongside the talented and passionate developers at Tripwire and your partners for the last 3+ years. We know it is difficult for employees to speak up or act out in these scenarios, and they may not feel comfortable to speak their minds. It is regrettable, but we feel it would be doing ourselves, your employees, your partners, and the industry as a whole a disservice to allow this pattern to continue without comment. We started Shipwright with the idea that it was finally time to put our money where our mouth is. We cannot, in good conscience, continue to work with Tripwire under the current leadership structure. We will begin the cancellation of our existing contracts, effective immediately. I really like this statement because it basically agrees with everything I just said. How about that? They did not make any statement about their own. What I like about this is they did not use it as an opportunity to soapbox at all, regardless of what you think of the issue. They just laid down the principle that it's not cool to implicate your employees or your associates in your own political opinions. And because of that, we are not going to associate with you because we don't agree with that. I have a ton of respect for that, and I think it's cool. Whatever you think of this law, I think it was a very dumb, boneheaded move that reeks of wanting attention to come out and say that. I thought it was funny. Yeah, I mean, this is why you'll never really see me make a... But I don't really like to get political, and because of that, or I'm not scared of politics, but the problem that I have with it is that there's a couple of extremely reasonable things that I think, I could make an argument for, like, don't persecute LGBT people. Do not be racist. Just very milquetoast opinions, I feel. Shouldn't be controversial. Just treat people well as long as they aren't harming you. Try not to attack people based off of immutable parts of their person. Just I feel is like generally pretty baseline of like being a positive part of society. And I have my own opinions on politics and stuff, but you really shouldn't hear them. Because one, you don't come to me for that. You go to whatever political podcast you like listening to, or whatever political channel you like listening to. Go there for your political stuff. No one cares, and you really shouldn't care about my political opinions. And I don't want to express them. Because the other thing that it does is like it puts a weird divide. Like I've been watching, so for instance, Did I tell this story? I wonder if I told this story on the podcast before. Yeah, I did. There was a channel that I was following that was pretty small, around the size that I am right now, who had a really good thing going with these Let's Plays that I thought were really funny and entertaining. And then all of a sudden, he just started. He did them with another guy, with like one of his friends. And then there was like 1 week where his friend couldn't come over to record, so he just started making as filler content like anti-SJW videos on just like super low-hanging fruit, like easy stuff to just call stupid. Nothing really substantial, no substantial arguments. Because the stuff that he's replying to is so ridiculous in the first place that no liberal person with like no reasonable liberal person would even entertain that idea or go to bat for that. Like, there's more important stuff. And then he just kept pumping these out, and it got super weird. It's like, dude, I came to you for like Let's Plays. I didn't want to know about your personal politics. And eventually it was just, his audience just dwindled. It just died. His channel just completely died. Because one, he went into something that nobody really wanted to hear about, which you can do. What the hell is going on in my house? The hell's moving around? I don't know if that's picking up. You can veer into just talking about other stuff. Like, every now and again, Donkey makes a video about just something totally random. You can do it. It is difficult, but you can do it. It's much more difficult, almost impossible to do it when you go from something kind of, benign, like gaming Let's Plays, to an extremely divisive topic like politics. You're going to alienate basically your audience, which was not politically based. You're now just driving a huge wedge in there, and only what you're basically guaranteeing losing 50% of your audience, which when you have like 400 subscribers is not a good idea. Unless your content is just so brilliant and well thought out that you can make it work and that you end up getting a bigger audience because of it. Which, when you're making response videos to low-hanging fruit like Jezebel articles, it's like, or the Mary Sue or whatever, it's like, all right, okay, yeah, no one's gonna stick around for this. You just alienated everyone. It's just generally like, I don't like talking about politics in my daily life. I don't like talking to most of my friends about it. I just don't want to talk about it because it makes people feel weird. And honestly, I mean, in general, talking about... I used to be really political when I was like a freshman in high school, and then I kind of grew out of it by the time I was like a junior, because I realized that it just made me really unhappy. And I was like, wow, when I stopped consuming a bunch of political content, my mental health improved so much. Like, people who just make political content, like, I don't know how they stay fucking sane. I don't know how they don't lose their goddamn minds. It's like the most unhealthy thing, because it's a huge shit show, and everyone sucks. And it's also the way that the world is run. It's like the closest thing you can get to gazing at like a Cthulhu Lovecraftian old god. You're like, oh my god, is this really what's going on in the world? It's so horrible. It's unbearable. It's like, why would you subject yourself to that or base your career around it? It sounds miserable. What the fuck? I'm recording this in the morning. Fucking people are walking around. I hate... This might be a little bit of a shorter episode, but I thought it was kind of dense. I tried out, so on my I made a little video about, before I go, made the video about Citizens Backwater Affairs, and I liked it. I thought it was good. I was trying to experiment with making shorter videos, just to test out how it goes. So far it has not gone well. Then again, my views are pretty inconsistent anyway. So, if anyone saw that, I feel like people who are listening to this podcast are also probably part of my core audience. So if you watched that video and you're listening to the end, then maybe give some feedback on it. I'd like to know what you thought about it. Maybe it was just a meh. Maybe it wasn't like the greatest thing or the worst thing ever. It was just, whatever. I enjoyed it. I had fun making it. It was a topic that I was interested in. But I haven't found really a consistent viewership, I guess, yet, or a consistent, substantial viewership. But if you had any thoughts on it and you wanted to let me know, even if it was just like, or whatever, you enjoyed it, but not necessarily more or less than my other videos, that's fine. Just let me know. I'm really curious what people thought about it, because the only comment on that video right now is me saying to leave feedback. Yeah, well, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Leave any comments or leave any questions you'd like me to answer on the next episode in the comments below. I'll definitely get to them. Bye.